Hey friends, it's been a little while and I hope you've had a really nourishing end of an old cycle and an inspiring beginning of the new cycle. And I wanted to come at you today with a little bit of astrological happenings. And a lot of you probably already know this, but the planet Pluto, which is really important in astrology, by the way, is moving into the sign of Aquarius. It will happen as it conjuncts the sun, so shining brightly on this thing, which we're going to talk about. And that's taking place this weekend, January 20th and 21st. So Pluto will be in Aquarius until the beginning of September. He'll retrograde back into Capricorn until November 21st, and then he's going to be in the sign of the revolutionary and the genius and the innovator until for 20 years, let's just say. So for 2044. Okay. So long time, and there is a lot that can be happening here. And so my job is not to tell you, I'm not a fortune teller, so I'm not going to say, oh, I think this is going to happen or I think that's going to happen. But I really appreciate astrology that looks to times when we have experienced these particular situations in the past and sheds light on how humanity has approached these situations and what has happened. Because I'm an evolutionary astrologer, I'm more concerned with personal astrology because it is individuals who make up the collective. And when we are doing our work and feeling inspired and living really aligned with our innate potential lives, then that changes the collective. And so I find it really important. One person can change the collective, one person can change the whole, and we've seen this historically in a lot of different ways. And so we're going to be talking a bit about Pluto today, because Pluto in evolutionary astrology is a super important planet. Pluto, to me, I consider him to be the planet of power and empowerment. And so power that is innate, power that we have to live vital and inspiring and, of course, empowered lives. Super important, right? And a lot of times we'll come in feeling like victims to circumstance or to a different circumstance, name any circumstance, name any attribute that we've brought in that is a wounded aspect of who we are, and that's going to get us to play the victim role, which is actually a part of Pluto. And what we're meant to do when we're playing that role is to transform all of the things, the ideas, the perceptions, the belief systems, the karmic patterns, the epigenetic and ancestral patterns that have led to victimhood, so that we can actually alchemize these underpinnings of who we are, or let's say who we think we are, in order to live empowered lives. And so Pluto is never in astrology just a planet that's all about you and only about you. And I mean, I would argue that most planets are, going to invite us to different aspects of relationship and relating. But like Venus, other ones will too. But Pluto in particular is a planet that always shows us where there are epigenetic or ancestral wounds, where there are karmic wounds. So he represents our greatest fears, our deepest wounds, and therefore our greatest capacity for transformation, our greatest capacity to alchemize anything and everything that we are seeing through a lens of misperception, or a lens that has been misguided because circumstances, again, of life, or our own particular karmic ancestral circumstances and ways of being have led us to live life a certain way without trying to get at the root of what those misperceptions and wounds are in order to heal them. And so we know that when we blame reality, that is victimhood. Did you know that? When we're blaming reality, we are actually taking our own sense of empowerment and giving it away. Being like, you know what? Fuck these circumstances, I can't do anything about them. I guess it's just going to play out like this. So that is going to keep us stuck in a place where we're never going to actually step into a place of true empowerment. Okay. So what Pluto, and I will say, I mean, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, all kinds of amazing things can happen. All kinds of not so amazing things can happen, but that's in any sign of the zodiac. So I want to be real about that. And we can talk a little bit about the energies of Aquarius as well. But coming back to Pluto, when we're blaming reality or blaming others, scapegoating them, gaslighting them, that's just us being unable to take responsibility for the choices we have made that have gotten us exactly where we are. And now I have complete compassion for this, because guess what? I do this sometimes and I've done it. I think it's a human thing. We've all done it. And especially if we've got patterns that are like what I'm talking about, where we are just like, oh, this sucks and I can't change it. In our DNA, we're here to transform that. Of course we can change it, because we can change anything. And so what Pluto wants us to do to change that is to first, I mean, and for me, I'm always about looking at how our thought patterns are actually there to show us and reveal to us something deeper. So if we have the same repetitive thoughts coming up over and over again, they're just wanting to show us, hey, you've got a belief system here that all these thoughts are reflective of, they are expressions of. Can you get to the root of that belief system, that thought pattern? Can you get to the root of that emotion and the emotions that are tied into that belief system and thought pattern? Because if you can, without pushing it away, what we resist persists. But if you can actually be willing to look at the truth of reality in the face, no matter how uncomfortable it is, that's Pluto, then you will be able to transform and alchemize anything, which is really beautiful. Okay, so what Pluto wants us to do is be like, okay, what are all these ideas or thoughts that are coming up? Let's say they're repetitive. What are they showing you? What are they showing us, right? And when we're able to go to those and see those clearly with the light of our conscious awareness, not just mind, but our full awareness, then we can actually hold this pattern with care, compassion, love, without going into it again. And there are a lot of wonderful psychotherapeutic techniques that help with this. And I have practiced at least a few of them, because it's been really helpful for me in my own transformation. Okay. But when we can actually see the totality of the pattern, then we actually have access to being able to alchemize it, to transmute it. And we recognize with Pluto, it is never just us. Okay, 7 generations that came before us, probably more, were dealing with this. And the 7 generations that will follow us, probably more, will live in the aftermath of this pattern if we don't heal it, but they will also get the healing if we choose to transform it. So Pluto always wants us to look at, well, what are the circumstances here that are so debilitating to us, frustrating to us, that seem to block us, and how do we get at these in a way that gives us back our power and helps us to recognize that we are actually free agents. I mean, the astrology that I practice is about free will. You even chose to bring in the particulars of your birth chart because those were the things you wanted to work with, dance with, play with, move with, and get really virtuosic at in this lifetime. So this is the astrology of free will. And how can we use that free will in a way that allows us to transform the stories we've been telling and become the heroes, the heroines, the beings who are writing our own stories with clarity, with freedom, sovereignty, with a sense of, again, inspiration, empowerment, grace, truth, intensity when it's needed, beauty, right? So Pluto wants us to address this underlying, and maybe many, for most of us, of these underlying patterns that will affect the way in which we view reality and therefore the way in which we engage reality. Okay, so Pluto moving into, I'm going dancing back and forth on the Capricorn Aquarius cusp. It's intense for those of you who have planets at the end of Aquarius, or sorry, the end of Capricorn and the beginning of Aquarius. Same as if you've got planets at the end of Cancer and the beginning of Leo. And same is true for if you have planets on the Taurus-Scorpio axis, so very beginning of Taurus-Scorpio or very end of Aries-Libra. Those are going to get squared, opposed, or conjunct by Pluto moving into Aquarius and then back into Capricorn. But whenever something like that is happening, a big shift like that, the planet, for me, I always look to, well, where's the natal planet that is transiting right now, and what is that asking of me in general in my birth chart? So I think that's an important thing to be moving with and aware of. And then I have heard many astrologers talk beautifully, and maybe some are a bit more doom and gloom, which happens too, about Pluto moving into Aquarius. And for me, again, if I have a mindset of doom and gloom about something, then that's disempowerment. And yes, we need to look at reality as it is. Saturn invites us to be real about what we're looking at. We don't want it Pollyanna-ish, but Pollyanna, the situation, but we also don't want the bleak side of Saturn that is always disempowered. As my teacher would say, oh, you can't fight City Hall, whatever, and just becomes apathetic and gives in to a scenario. That is not helpful. Okay, so yeah, Pluto also, like Saturn, they have some things in common. They want us to look at reality in the face, truthfully, honestly, and be like, okay, this is what's happening, but at the same time, there is a sense of all of this is sacred. There's nothing that isn't sacred. I don't want to say most, many have forgotten that. And that's why we have the complicated issues we have and complex trauma that lives in our earth and lives in our cells and our tissues and our DNA that we are here to heal and transform. Because the more work you do on yourself, the more you realize about who you are and what you're capable of in this really big way, the more healing we bring to our planet, the more healing you bring, and the more all of us, there's a ripple effect. Right? Everything gets transformed. The one person changes the whole. Okay. So Aquarius, this is an energy of the genius, the revolutionary, the exile, right? One who feels really ostracized because they can see things from, really, really expansive perspective, and maybe a lot of others have not gotten there yet. So they're like, oh, why are we getting stuck here? Well, not everyone is there yet. Okay, but that's the beauty of Aquarian energy. It can see with this third eye open vision. It's innovative, and it can actually bring us, kind of usher us and move humanity into the future in a way that can be really beautiful. It can, because Aquarius can be seen as one who is idealistic, who likes utopian visions of reality, and is there a problem here? I mean, yeah, if we live too much into that, sure, because we also have to take into account human nature and also human growth and evolution. And so where we are might not be where we're going yet, right? Our potential, we may not have fully stepped into that yet, and that's going to have an effect, right? But when we talk about Aquarius, or when I think about it from an evolutionary perspective, I like to think of Aquarius as the energy of authenticity. So what is most authentic to our hearts, our minds, our souls, what is most authentic to every part of who we are. It would be needing to say yes to the things that feel most deeply resonant, that allow us to express our heart of hearts and who we really are in the world in a way that it's not giving in to other people's beliefs or ideas about how reality is. Aquarius I call it the sign of Fleetwood Mac. Aquarius needs to go their own way. So you can go your own way, well, you have to. And Aquarius must do that in order to really get its needs met. And in so doing, sometimes Aquarius feels like they are disappointing other people who want them to do what they're doing differently, because the people are like, oh, I know what's best for you, or oh, why don't you just do things like everybody else? Like, you know, you're kind of weird. Aquarius is like, I will never do things like everybody else. One, because I am not like everyone else. I am a unique, sovereign, authentic individual who has beautiful gifts to share with the world, and they're not everybody else's. And the more I don't listen to my own inner guidance system, what I like to call the IGS, the more I don't listen to my IGS and I become like everybody else, guess what? Those gifts are diminished. They're not allowed to be themselves. They kind of go away. Right? But the more Aquarius lives into this inner guidance system and their own gifts and what they have to share with reality, then the more, one, the happier they are, but then the more our world changes, our collective changes in a really positive way, because this energy of authenticity and sovereignty and uniqueness is so important. It's what our world needs. The more we live our most authentic selves, the freer the world becomes to do the same. And then we can actually all celebrate each other. That's the whole point, is to be able to celebrate each other and everyone's uniqueness, and in a way that uplifts ourselves, so that we just keep inspiring each other. And of course, someone's most authentic nature might not be what you're into, but at least they're doing what's authentic, and we can celebrate that even if we don't agree with it, because it's an inspiration for us to do what's authentic for us. Now, the dark side of this, the dark side of not living, so Pluto always wants us to look at the dark side of something and the shadow of it, right? That's the blaming, the scapegoating, the living in a disempowered state. But the dark side of Aquarius is not living our truth, not embodying who we know we are and who we know we're capable of becoming. And so becoming disempowered in that way and being like, oh, I'm not a sovereign being. I don't have the freedom to be who I actually am. And I'm just going to let these systems and, you know, institutions that are in place, these old ideas about what humans are supposed to be doing, govern my life. Wah, wah. That sounds so dull, and it sounds really sad, doesn't it? It's like, oh, I'm just gonna be an automaton, go about doing things just because everybody else tells me I should do them that way. Really? That's the dark side of Aquarius. And this dark side of Aquarius is what creates brutal regimes that allow terrible things to happen on our planet. And I don't even need to make a list, because I'm sure you've taken some kind of history class or can see what's happening on the planet and know that brutal regimes happen because people aren't necessarily being authentic to their inner guidance system and what's most important to their heart of hearts, which would actually bring us all together in more clear ways. But the dark side of Aquarius individually is dissociation, because if we're not doing what we're meant to be doing on the planet, what we agreed to come in and do, and be like, maybe some of us are just so, you know, out there in certain ways to others. It's why, you know, maybe you moved somewhere because you're like, oh, this place is full of a bunch of creative, interesting weirdos, you know? So that happens. That's Aquarian. But when we are not living our truth in the world, The shadow side of this is dissociation. And so we're just going through the motions of living our lives without actually being present. I sometimes describe this as like just being in a fishbowl where there's like this whole filter in between us and reality, and it's almost like we can't even break through that because we've become so detached from our lives. And so that is not necessarily where we want to go. And sometimes we feel like we have to go to the shadow side of something, right, in order to know it, so that then we can do something else. And I certainly have learned lessons that way, where I'm like, oh, do I do it this way? Oh gosh, no, I don't do it that way. Okay, I tried that, it did not work, and I had to go a different way. Remember, Aquarius needs to go their own way. You can go your own way, you need to go your own way. Okay, so what are the ways maybe you are, being disempowered in your own sense of authenticity? And what does it mean to be empowered in your authenticity? What does it mean to be a free agent, to take responsibility for life and be like, oh, okay, I don't like these circumstances, I'm gonna shift them. How can I change them? How can I step into my most authentic self to actually transform what's happening here, but also the belief system and the patterns and the emotions that created the place where I am right now? Okay, so that's what I'm going to leave us with today. Happy Pluto moving into Aquarius as the sun moves into Aquarius and we move into the season of the revolutionary. And may we truly be revolutionary in the ways in which we're willing to look at ourselves, to see the truth of who we are, what we're capable of, the stories we've told ourselves that don't work, and the ones that we can create that are actually really empowering for ourselves and humanity. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions, and you know where to find me.